My family laughed when they saw I inherited an old wooden puzzle box while they got the house and money. I was sitting in my creaky rocking chair, staring at the rain pattering against my apartment window, thinking about Grandpa Joe, not the weirdo from that Chocolate Factory movie, my actual grandfather. The memory hit me like it was yesterday. Me at 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor of his workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and old leather-bound books. My small hands fumbling with one of his hand-carved wooden puzzles while he watched patiently from his workbench. "Life's just a big puzzle, Timmy," he'd say in that gravelly voice, eyes crinkling at the corners. "Don't rush it, but don't you ever give up either." Mom thought he was eccentric. Dad would grumble that the old man was wasting precious time. My older siblings, Kevin and Liz, would just roll their eyes whenever I mentioned spending time at Grandpa's workshop. But those moments were magic to me. We were like two detectives searching for hidden treasure, while the rest of the world played the role of skeptical bystanders. The thing about Grandpa Joe was that he never got rich or famous. No fancy degree hanging on his wall. Just callous hands and a mind that could figure out anything mechanical. His workshop was filled with puzzles he collected or made himself, from simple wooden cubes that unfolded in surprising ways to intricate contraptions that took days to solve. "Nobody appreciates a good mystery anymore, Timmy," he'd say. "Everyone wants instant gratification, but the sweetest victories are the ones you have to work for." My girlfriend Amy plopped down next to me on the couch, interrupting my nostalgia trip. She was the only one who didn't laugh when I talked about Grandpa's puzzles. Actually seemed interested. "He sounds like some genius straight out of an Indiana Jones movie," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. Amy never got to meet him, but sometimes I think they would have gotten along better than he did with most of our family. She had that same curiosity about how things work. I told her about the intricately carved puzzle boxes he made, how some had 5 or 6 steps just to open them, how he'd spend months designing the perfect mechanism, how his eyes would light up when I'd finally crack one open. "So, did he ever hide anything cool inside them?" she asked. "Usually just a piece of candy or a dollar bill. It was never about what was inside. It was about the journey to get there." Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. Picture this. A table loaded with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and the unmistakable aroma of family drama about to boil over. We were all crowded around the dining table at my parents' place. Mom was fussing over the gravy. Dad was carving the turkey with surgical precision, and my siblings were already 2 glasses deep into the wine. Grandpa Joe sat quietly at the end of the table, wearing his usual flannel shirt and suspenders, slightly out of place among everyone dressed in their holiday best. The conversation turned to Grandpa's retirement hobbies after Kevin noticed calluses on his hands. "Grandpa, aren't you too old to still be playing with those wooden toys?" Kevin asked with a smirk. "Maybe it's time to find a more age-appropriate hobby?" Liz chimed in, swirling her wine. "Yeah, why don't you sell those things on eBay? Might actually make a few bucks instead of just collecting dust." Everyone laughed except me and Grandpa. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was a wine. Maybe it was years of watching them dismiss him, but I slammed my fork down hard enough to make the plates jump. "He's taught me more about patience and problem-solving than all of you combined." The words came out louder than intended. Mom hissed from across the table, "Tim, don't ruin Thanksgiving." Dad gave me that look, the one that said I was making a scene. Grandpa just placed his weathered hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. "Don't worry about it, son. Dogs bark, but the caravan moves on." His voice was calm, but I could see the hurt in his eyes, and it tore me up inside. The rest of dinner passed in awkward conversation about football and neighbors' renovations. Grandpa barely touched his food. Later that night, as everyone was clearing dishes and arguing about which football game to watch, I found him on the back porch, staring up at the stars. "Sorry about earlier," I mumbled, leaning against a railing beside him. He shook his head. "You know what the hardest puzzle is, Timmy?" He didn't wait for my answer. People can't figure him out with logic or patience. Sometimes the pieces just don't fit. He pulled something from his pocket, a small, intricately carved wooden box about the size of a deck of cards. The The wood was dark and polished, with patterns I'd never seen before. "Been working on this one for years," he said, turning it over in his hands. "My masterpiece. Still not quite finished." I asked if I could see it, but he tucked it back into his jacket. "Not yet. Some puzzles need to wait for the right time." 3 months later, Mom called me at 2 a.m. I knew it was bad news before I even answered. "Heart attack," she said, her voice breaking. "He didn't make it, Tim." The funeral was quiet and sparsely attended. Kevin and Liz whispered about inheritance by the coffee table, while I stared at Grandpa's old jacket hanging on a coat rack. I remembered his words from that Thanksgiving. Some puzzles need to wait for the right time. I kept thinking about what he always told me. The most important things are hidden where nobody thinks to look. I didn't understand then, but now the words spun in my head like a clue waiting to be deciphered. A few days after the funeral, Mom called to tell me there would be a reading of Grandpa's will next week. Her voice sounded tired, worn down by grief and the logistics of death. "I hope he left everything in order," she sighed. "You know how unconventional your grandfather could be." Kevin and Liz were already making plans. I overheard them talking about Grandpa's house, how Kevin thought it would make a perfect Airbnb with some renovations, how Liz had her eye on his vintage truck. Nobody mentioned his workshop. Nobody cared about his puzzles or the wisdom hidden in those wooden contraptions. They just saw dollar signs and property values. The night before the will reading, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Grandpa's face, hearing his voice. The most important things are hidden where nobody thinks to look. What was he trying to tell me all those years? Was it just old man wisdom or something more specific? Something important? I remembered that small wooden box he showed me on Thanksgiving. His masterpiece, he'd called it. Not quite finished, he'd said. Where was it now? What was inside it? The lawyer's appointment was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning. I had a strange feeling in my gut, like I was missing something obvious. Like Grandpa had left me a puzzle bigger than any wooden box, and I wasn't seeing the pattern. Whatever was waiting at the lawyer's office, I had a feeling it would change everything, and somehow I needed to be ready. That Monday morning arrived with gray skies and persistent drizzle, fitting weather for reading a will. I showed up at the lawyer's office 15 minutes early, clutching a travel mug of coffee like it was some kind of shield. The receptionist pointed me to a small conference room where Mom, Dad, Kevin, and Liz were already waiting. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dad kept checking his watch every 30 seconds. Kevin scrolled through his phone, probably looking at renovation ideas for Grandpa's house already. Liz was dressed like she was heading to a business meeting rather than hearing her grandfather's last wishes. "Look who decided to show up," Kevin muttered without looking up from his phone. Mr. Peterson, the lawyer, was a balding man with thick glasses and a bow tie that seemed to belong to another era. Kind of like Grandpa, I thought. He carried a leather portfolio and set it on the table with deliberate care. That's when I noticed it. Sitting on the corner of his desk was a small Japanese wooden box with intricate patterns carved into its surface, about the size of a shoebox, but infinitely more interesting. My heart skipped. "Now that everyone is here, we can begin," Mr. Peterson said, adjusting his glasses. I, Joseph Franklin Miller, being of sound mind, the legal jargon washed over me in waves. I barely registered the details as Mr. Peterson droned on about assets and distributions. My eyes kept drifting back to that wooden box. It looked exactly like the kind of thing Grandpa would have treasured. The house at 1423, Oak Avenue and all its contents, excluding items specifically mentioned herein, along with my savings totaling approximately $200,000, to be divided equally between my grandchildren Kevin and Elizabeth Miller. Kevin and Liz exchanged victorious glances. I could practically see the dollar signs reflecting in their eyes. Mom squeezed Dad's hand with relief. They wouldn't have to deal with selling the house or clearing it out. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and continued. To my grandson Timothy Miller, I leave my collection of notebooks containing all my puzzle designs and techniques, and a small Japanese puzzle box currently in possession of my attorney. The room went silent for a beat before Kevin snorted loudly. "Seriously? That's it?" Dad gets overlooked, and Tim gets some old notebooks and a toy. Mr. Peterson ignored the outburst and picked up the wooden box, walking around the table to place it in front of me. It was heavier than it looked, the wood warm and smooth under my fingers. Mr. Miller specified that this item was of particular importance, the lawyer explained, his voice neutral. He asked that I emphasize it was created by master craftsman Himitsu Bako in Hakone, Japan, and is considered quite valuable among collectors. Liz rolled her eyes. Oh, you're a treasure. Tim, maybe there's a pizza coupon inside. I clutched the box and met her gaze. He knew what he was doing. This only made them laugh harder. Kevin pretended to wipe away tears of mirth. Oh, man, Grandpa got you good. We get house and cash. You get homework and a wooden box. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. There were papers to sign, technicalities to discuss. I barely heard any of it, my attention fixed on the box in my hands. It was beautiful, the grain of the wood flowing seamlessly into complex geometric patterns. Sliding panels, hidden grooves, clever joinery. This wasn't just any puzzle box. This was artistry. As we left the office, Kevin slapped me on the back a little too hard. No hard feelings, right, bro? I mean, you were always his favorite little sidekick. Makes sense he'd leave you his weird hobby stuff. I didn't respond, just carefully placed the box in my backpack and zipped it closed. In the parking lot, Amy was waiting in her beat-up Honda. Her face lit up when she saw me, then immediately fell as she registered my expression. That bad? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. I pulled out the box and set it on my lap. This is what he left me, along with his design notebooks. She studied it, reaching out to run her fingers along the polished surface. It's beautiful, she said softly. What's inside? No idea. It's a puzzle box. Could take days to figure out how to open it. Do you really think there's something valuable in there? I nodded. Grandpa never joked about important things. Back at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table, turning the box over in my hands. The craftsmanship was incredible. Every joint fitted perfectly, every surface smooth as silk. Amy brought me a sandwich and watched me examine it from every angle. If there's nothing inside, I'll still love you. Poor but stubborn as you are, she joked, ruffling my hair. I laughed, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. What if it was empty? What if Grandpa's final gift was just another lesson in patience? What if Kevin and Liz were right to laugh? My phone buzzed. Speaking of the devil, Kevin's name flashed on the screen. Still play with that silly thing? He asked without preamble when I answered. I hung up without responding and turned my phone off. I closed my eyes, tried to remember everything Grandpa had taught me about puzzles. Listen to the wood, Tim, he used to say. It'll tell you what to do. I ran my fingers along the edges, feeling for inconsistencies. There were sliding panels on all sides, but they seemed locked in place. Pressing here, pulling there, nothing budged. But there was something about the grain pattern on the top that caught my eye. It didn't quite match the sides. It wasn't a mistake. Grandpa would have said it was a clue. For an hour, I explored every millimeter of that box. Amy had given up watching and was half dozing on the couch with Netflix in the background. My fingers were starting to cramp when I felt it. A nearly imperceptible ridge along one edge. I pressed gently and heard a soft click. A small panel on the side slid open, revealing a tiny compartment. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Amy bolted upright when I gasped. You did it? I carefully unfolded the note, recognizing Grandpa's handwriting immediately. You're halfway there, kid. Don't give up. Amy squealed. I told you he was cool. She peered at the box. But that compartment is tiny. There's got to be more to it. I placed the note carefully on the table and studied the box with new determination. The open panel had revealed additional grooves and markings that weren't visible before. This wasn't just a puzzle. It was a multi-layered challenge. Halfway there, I murmured, that means there's more. Much more. That night, I dreamed of Grandpa's workshop. The smell of sawdust, the sound of his patient voice explaining how the world worked, one puzzle at a time. I woke up with my mind clearer than it had been in months. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spread out on the living room floor with a box, Grandpa's note, and a set of precision tools I'd borrowed from my neighbor. Amy had left for her shift at the hospital, leaving me alone with my thoughts and this mysterious inheritance. "What are you trying to tell me, Grandpa?" I whispered to the empty room, turning the box over my hands. The first compartment was just the beginning. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see that the box was a masterpiece of hidden mechanisms. Each discovery would lead to another, like breadcrumbs on a trail. I set the note down on the table and studied the puzzle box with renewed vigor. This wasn't just some trinket. It was a message from beyond, a challenge from a man who had taught me everything I knew about patience and perseverance. The box was a multi-layered puzzle, and I had only scratched the surface. With fresh determination, I tackled again, knowing that Grandpa was guiding me forward, one hidden compartment at a time. For the next 3 nights, I barely slept. My apartment transformed into what looked like a conspiracy theorist's lair. Grandpa's puzzle box sat in the center of my coffee table, surrounded by his notebook spread open to various pages, yellow sticky notes marking potential clues, and empty coffee cups forming a caffeinated perimeter. I was downing coffee like a long-haul trucker on a deadline, my eyes burning, but my mind refusing to quit. Amy came over after her shift at the hospital and actually took a step back when she saw the state of my living room. "Wow! You look like a mad scientist right before the breakthrough that either saves or destroys the world," she said, carefully stepping over a stack of notes I'd arranged on the floor in a pattern that made sense only to my sleep-deprived brain. I grunted something unintelligible in response, not looking up from the notebook I was studying. Maybe I was going mad. Maybe Grandpa's final gift wasn't treasure, but a one-way ticket to obsession. Grandpa's notebooks were absolute chaos. Beautiful, brilliant chaos. Pages filled with intricate gear drawings, Japanese characters, measurements, and philosophical musings. On one page, he'd sketched what looked like the inner mechanism of a clock. On the next was a quote, "Patience is the key to all doors." The man's mind jumped between practical engineering and Zen philosophy without missing a beat. I kept finding references to something called karakuri, which I learned was a type of Japanese mechanical puzzle. Grandpa had filled entire pages with notes about these devices, sketching mechanisms and writing observations about how they worked. "Some of these mechanisms are over 400 years old," he'd written, "but they still have secrets to teach us about hidden movement and misdirection." Amy brought me a sandwich that I didn't remember asking for and sat on the arm of my chair, watching me flip through the notebooks. "You know," she said carefully, "not to sound like your siblings, but what if there's nothing special in the box? What if it's just a really complicated puzzle with no prize at the end?" I finally looked up at her, probably with dark circles under my eyes and hair sticking out in all directions. "Then the journey is the prize," I said, sounding more philosophical than I felt. "That's what he always told me." She smiled and kissed the top of my head. "You smell terrible. At least take a shower between epiphanies." I tried everything with that box. I tapped it, turned it, pressed every square millimeter of its surface. I even sniffed the wood. It smelled like old oak and secrets. Something about the grain pattern on the top panel kept drawing my eye. It wasn't random. It was designed to lead somewhere. At some point during the second night, I remembered something Grandpa used to say whenever I got stuck on one of his puzzles as a kid. "If you're stuck, take a step back." I had been so focused on individual panels and mechanisms that I wasn't seeing the box as a whole. I set it down and just looked at it from across the room, letting my eyes unfocus slightly. That's when it hit me. The pattern on the top wasn't just decorative. It was a map. The swirls in the wood grain formed a subtle path that led to one specific corner. Not obvious unless you were looking for it. I rushed back to the box and examined that corner more carefully. There was a small panel there that I'd tried sliding before, but it hadn't budged. What if it didn't slide? What if it... I gripped the panel and tried rotating it instead. Nothing at first, then a soft click as something gave way. The panel turned a quarter rotation and stopped. My heart racing. I flipped the box over and found that another panel had loosened on the opposite side. This one slid easily now, revealing a tiny compartment I hadn't discovered before. Inside was a yellow photograph. Grandpa is a young man, maybe in his 20s, standing proudly next to what looked like his first workshop. He was smiling broadly, a wooden puzzle in his hands, written on the back in faded ink. "You're getting close, Tim." I stared at the photo, feeling a lump form in my throat. He prepared this years ago, knowing someday I'd be the one to find it. Not Kevin, not Liz, me. He knew I wouldn't give up. When Amy came back from her morning run, she found me grinning like an idiot, holding the photograph. "You got it?" she asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. I showed her the photo and the new opening in the box. Part of it. "There's more." She clapped her hands together. He would have been so proud. For a moment, it felt like Grandpa was sitting right there with us, nodding in approval. The photograph was a clue itself. I noticed Grandpa was standing in front of a workbench with tools arranged in a specific pattern. The arrangement looked deliberate, not random, almost like another map. And one of the tools was positioned exactly where the next hidden mechanism might be on my box. Back to the puzzle, I went, this time focusing on that spot, a seemingly solid section on the bottom edge. I pressed it firmly, while simultaneously sliding a panel on the adjacent side. Another click, louder this time. A seam appeared where there hadn't been one before. "Unbelievable," I whispered to the empty room. Amy had left for her shift, and I was alone with Grandpa's creation coming to life in my hands. My phone buzzed. It was Kevin. "Hey, we're clearing out Grandpa's workshop tomorrow. Anything specific you want before we start selling stuff off?" My stomach dropped. I had completely forgotten about the workshop clean-out. They were going to dismantle Grandpa's sacred space, sell his tools for pocket change, toss his unfinished projects in a dumpster. "I want all of it," I said, the words coming out before I could think. "All of what?" "The workshop. Everything in it. Don't touch anything until I get there." Kevin sighed dramatically. "Tim, be reasonable. It's a bunch of old tools and with scraps. The real estate agent is coming Monday." "I don't care. Don't touch the workshop." I hung up before he could argue further. Turning back to the puzzle box, I felt a new urgency. Whatever Grandpa wanted me to find, I needed to discover it before Kevin and Liz erased every trace of his life's work. I worked through the night, following each new clue the box revealed. With each hidden compartment I discovered, the mechanism became more complex, more beautiful. This wasn't just a puzzle. It was Grandpa's magnum opus, a testament to everything he knew about woodworking and mechanical design. By dawn, my fingers were sore and my eyes were burning, but I was getting close. I could feel it. The box had transformed several times, panels shifting and sliding to reveal new configurations. Japanese puzzle boxes were known for having multiple steps. Some required more than 50 moves to fully open, but this one seemed to have been customized, made more complex than any traditional design. As the morning sun filtered through my blinds, I heard another click, different from the others, deeper somehow. The entire top section of the box shifted slightly, as if something had been unlocked at the core. I held my breath and pressed the center panel. It resisted for a moment, then began to rise. The sides fell away simultaneously, unfolding like a wooden flower blooming in my hands. Inside the now open center was a small velvet pouch, a yellowed bank document, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Grandpa's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope first. "Dear Tim, if you're reading this, you've solved my final puzzle. I always knew you would. You were the only one who ever truly understood my soul, not just my eccentricities, but the why behind them. Puzzles aren't about the solution. They're about the journey, the moments of discovery, the satisfaction of understanding how all the pieces fit together. Just like life, you've proven yourself worthy of what comes next." Inside the pouch is a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Cincinnati, account number 7729B. Everything inside is yours now. Use it wisely, and remember, some treasures are meant to be shared, others are meant to be kept safe, and the most valuable ones are those that can't be measured in dollars. I'm proud of you, kiddo. Love, always, Grandpa Joe. P.S. Don't tell your brother, and sister until the time is right. You'll know when. I sat in stunned silence, reading the letter 3 more times. Then I carefully opened the velvet pouch. Inside was an old-fashioned brass key with an ornate head and the number 7729 be engraved on it. The bank document was a safety deposit box registration from First National Bank of Cincinnati, dated 30 years ago. The account holder was listed as Joseph Franklin Miller, Grandpa's full name. My mind was racing. Cincinnati was about a 2-hour drive from my apartment. What could Grandpa have kept in a safety deposit box all these years? Whatever it was, he'd gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure only I would find it. I checked the time, 6:47 a.m. The bank wouldn't open until 9 o'clock. I had just enough time to shower, change, and make the drive if I left immediately. As I gathered the key, the bank document, and Grandpa's letter, my phone buzzed with text from Amy. "How's the puzzle hunt going? Found any buried treasure yet?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, to share this incredible moment with someone who would appreciate it. But something held me back. Grandpa's words echoed in my mind. "Don't tell your brother and sister until the time is right. You'll know when." Did that apply to Amy too? I wasn't sure. What I did know was that I needed to see what was in that safety deposit box before I told anyone about it. I texted back, "Making progress. Talk later." I threw some clothes in a backpack, along with the key, documents, and Grandpa's letter. As an afterthought, I took a photo of the fully opened puzzle box. Proof of what I'd accomplished, just in case Kevin and Liz didn't believe me later. The morning traffic was lighter than usual as I headed toward the interstate, my mind buzzing with possibilities. What would I find in Cincinnati? Money? Legal documents? More puzzles? Whatever it was, Grandpa had gone to incredible lengths to make sure it passed directly to me, bypassing the formal will and the prying eyes of the rest of the family. He'd created an inheritance that only someone with patience, determination, and love for his craft could claim. As I merged on the highway heading east, the rising sun at my back, I felt a strange mixture of excitement and melancholy. This was Grandpa's final gift to me, not just whatever waited in that safety deposit box, but the adventure itself, the challenge, the connection I felt to him through every step of solving his masterpiece puzzle. For the first time since his death, I felt like he wasn't really gone. His mind, his creativity, his love. They lived on in the puzzle he created for me, in the journey he'd set me on. 2 hours to Cincinnati. 2 hours to whatever Grandpa had been keeping safe all these years, waiting for the right person for me to claim it. My heart pounded with anticipation as the miles rolled by. Whatever waited for me in that bank, I knew my life was about to change in ways I couldn't imagine. Grandpa's final puzzle was about to reveal its ultimate secret. The 2-hour drive to Cincinnati felt like the longest road trip of my life. Every mile marker was another minute closer to whatever Grandpa had been keeping locked away for decades. My mind kept spinning wild scenarios. Maybe it was his rare puzzle collection, or perhaps old family heirlooms he didn't trust anyone else with. Whatever waited in that safety deposit box, I knew it mattered enough for him to create an elaborate puzzle just to lead me there. I pulled into the bank's parking lot at 9:17 a.m., just as they were opening for business. First National Bank of Cincinnati wasn't particularly impressive, just a sturdy brick building that had probably been standing since the 1950s. It had that serious, no-nonsense look that old banks have, like it was built specifically to make you feel that your money was safe behind its thick walls. Walking through those heavy glass doors, I felt like a kid sneaking into an R-rated movie. My palms were sweaty, and I kept checking my pocket to make sure the key was still there. The document and letter were safely tucked in my wallet. I probably looked suspicious as hell, glancing around nervously while waiting for someone to help me. A middle-aged woman with glasses hanging from a chain around her neck finally called me to her desk. Her nameplate read Margaret Wilson, Customer Service Manager. "How can I help you today?" she asked, giving me the practiced smile of someone who'd been in customer service for decades. I cleared my throat and placed the safety deposit box registration on her desk. I need to access this safety deposit box. It belonged to my grandfather, Joseph Miller. He passed away recently. She examined the document with a careful eye. "I'm sorry for your loss. Do you have the key and proper identification?" I nodded, sliding over my driver's license and the ornate brass key. "One moment while I verify this information," she said, turning to her computer. Those minutes felt like hours. What if the account had been closed? What if Grandpa had emptied it years ago and forgotten to update his puzzle box message? Eventually, Ms. Wilson nodded with satisfaction. "Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Miller." Mr. Peterson from the law firm already called to inform us about the inheritance situation. "If you'll follow me to the vault area." The bank vault looked exactly like something from an old heist movie. Massive metal door, security cameras in every corner, and a guard standing nearby trying to look both bored and vigilant at the same time. Ms. Wilson led me to a small private room with a table and chair. "I'll retrieve box 7729B for you. You can examine the contents in privacy here. Take as much time as you need, and ring the bell when you're finished." She disappeared into the vault and returned moments later, carrying a long metal box. It wasn't particularly large, maybe 24 inches long, 12 inches wide, and 4 inches deep. Just an ordinary safety deposit box. But my heart was racing like I was about to open Blackbeard's treasure chest. "I'll leave you to it," she said, placing the box on the table before quietly closing the door behind her. I sat there for a full minute, just staring at the box. This was the culmination of Grandpa's final puzzle, the treasure he deemed worthy of such elaborate protection. With slightly trembling hands, I inserted the key and turned it. The lid opened smoothly, revealing several cloth pouches, a stack of documents in a manila folder, and a small wooden box that looked suspiciously like a miniature version of the puzzle box I'd just solved. I started with the pouches, carefully untying the first one. Inside were gold coins, not modern investment coins, but older ones, some looking like they were from the early 1900s. The second and third pouches held similar contents, more gold coins and what looked like a few small uncut gemstones. My mind was struggling to process what I was seeing. Grandpa Joe, the same man who wore the same flannel shirt until it literally fell apart, had been hiding a small fortune in a bank vault. Next, I opened the manila folder. Inside were stock certificates, bearer bonds, which I'd only ever seen in movies, and property deeds. Some of the documents dated back to the 1960s. On top was a neatly typed inventory sheet with current estimated values for each item. Total estimated value, $5,523,840. I almost fell out my chair. That couldn't be right. Over $5 million? From Grandpa Joe, who drove a 20-year-old pickup truck and refused to buy new tools when he could fix the old ones just fine? There had to be some mistake. I double-checked the name on the documents. Joseph Franklin Miller. That was definitely Grandpa. I flipped through the inventory again. Gold coins valued at around $800,000. Stocks and bonds worth over $3 million thanks to decades of growth. Property deeds for land in 3 states worth another $1.7 million. "Grandpa, you got to be kidding me," I whispered to the empty room. The small wooden box was the last item in the safety deposit box. Unlike its larger counterpart, this one opened easily with a simple slide mechanism. Inside was another letter from Grandpa. "Dear Tim, if you're reading this, then you've discovered my little nest egg. Surprised? I bet you are. Everyone always thought I was just a crazy old man who liked to whittle wood. That's exactly what I wanted them to think. The truth is, I made some smart investments in my younger days. Bought Apple stock when everyone thought computers were just a fad. Put money in Microsoft when Bill Gates was still working in his garage. Bought land outside growing cities when it was dirt cheap. Nothing flashy, nothing risky, just patient investing over decades. Why didn't I spend it? Because the best things in life aren't things, Timmy. The joy I got from creating puzzles in my workshop, teaching you about patience and problem solving, that was worth more than any luxury could provide. So why am I giving it all to you? Because you saw value in the things that truly mattered. You appreciated the journey, not just the destination. While Kevin and Liz rolled their eyes at my useless hobby, you saw the beauty in it. Use this windfall wisely, Timmy. Remember what I always told you. Money is like wood. In the right hands, it can create something beautiful. Love, always, Grandpa Joe. I sat in stunned silence, reading the letter 3 more times. Grandpa Joe, secret millionaire. The man who patched his jeans instead of buying new ones. The man who collected rainwater to save on his water bill. All that time, he was sitting on a fortune that could have bought him anything he wanted, but he chose puzzles. He chose his workshop. He chose simple pleasures and the joy of creation over luxury and comfort. And now, for some reason, he'd chosen me to inherit it all. I carefully packed everything back into the safety deposit box, keeping only the letter and inventory. When I rang the bell, Ms. Wilson returned promptly. "Did you find everything in order?" she asked with professional courtesy. I must have looked shell-shocked because she gave me a knowing smile. Mr. Miller was a long-time client of our bank. A very interesting gentleman. "You have no idea," I managed to reply. The drive back home was a blur. My mind was swimming with the implications of what I'd just discovered. $5 million. A fortune that Grandpa had secretly accumulated while living like he barely had 2 nickels to rub together. That would have to wait for another day. I needed time to process what had just happened. Timothy Miller, underpaid graphic designer with student loans and a 10-year-old Honda Civic with muffler held on by hope and duct tape, was suddenly worth over $5 million. By the time I got home, Amy had texted me 3 times asking how the mystery trip went. I didn't know what to tell her. How you casually mentioned that your quirky grandfather just posthumously made you a millionaire. I decided to keep it to myself for a few days while I figured out what to do. Grandpa had kept this secret for decades. I could manage a week. 2 weeks later, my old Honda finally gave up the ghost. The transmission died in spectacular fashion on the highway, forcing me to get it towed to a junkyard. I took it as a sign and bought myself a new car. Nothing flashy, just a reliable mid-range Toyota that wouldn't draw attention. Cash payment, no financing needed. I was sitting in my new car in the apartment parking lot when my phone rang. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, bro," he started, with that fake casual tone he used when he wanted something. "So, Liz and I have been talking. We heard you got a new car. Like brand new. I frowned. How did he know that already? We barely talked since we were reading. "Yeah, my Honda died. Had to replace it." Right. Look, we're not idiots, Tim. That wooden box had something valuable in it, didn't it? Some collector's item or whatever that you've already sold. My stomach tensed. "What makes you say that?" "Well, you're suddenly buying new cars when last month you were complaining about being broke. Connect the dots, genius." I could practically hear the dollar signs in his voice. The same voice that had mocked Grandpa's useless hobby for years. The box was empty. I lied. The car is financed. I got a good deal because my credit score is decent. "Bull," Kevin snapped. "Look, we're family. If Grandpa left something valuable, it should be shared. He wouldn't want you hoarding it all." I nearly laughed out loud. Shared? Like how you and Liz shared his house by planning to sell it before his body was even cold. That's different. The will clearly gave us the house. But if there was something else, something not specified in the will... There wasn't. Goodbye, Kevin. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger. Within minutes, my phone dinged with a message from Liz. "Grandpa would have wanted fairness. We're family, Tim. Think about what's right." Fairness? The same people who called Grandpa a fool behind his back were now invoking his name to claim his money. I could still hear their laughter at the will reading. "Maybe there's a pizza coupon inside." The next few days brought more texts, more calls. Kevin and Liz had apparently teamed up, taking turns with good cop/bad cop routines to try to get me to confess about my sudden financial improvement. They even got Mom involved, who called me concerned that there was fighting over Grandpa's memory. I stuck to my story. The box was just a sentimental gift. The car was financed. Everything was normal, but each lie felt like a betrayal of Grandpa's trust. He'd chosen me for a reason, and here I was hiding his gift instead of honoring it. Grandpa's final letter burned in my mind. "Use this windfall wisely," he'd written. What did wisdom look like when you suddenly had millions? Part of me was afraid of what this wealth might do to me to my relationships, to everything I thought I knew about myself. Things came to a head when Kevin and Liz insisted on a family meeting at Mom and Dad's house. I knew it was an ambush before I even arrived, but I went anyway. Some part of me wanted this confrontation, wanted to finally say all the things I've been holding back. Mom had made her famous lasagna, as if good food could smooth over family tension. Dad sat uncomfortably at the head of the table, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Kevin and Liz sat together on one side, a united front against me. We need to talk about Grandpa's inheritance, Kevin began after dinner, not even pretending this was a normal family gathering. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The will was pretty clear. Was it, though? Liz chimed in. Because it seems like he left you something valuable in that box, something you're not sharing with the family. I don't know what you're talking about. Kevin's face flushed red. Stop lying to us, Tim. You show up with a brand new car 2 weeks after getting that stupid box. You think we're idiots? Mom looked between us nervously. Boys, please. Your grandfather wouldn't want this fighting. That was when Kevin brought out the fake tears. I couldn't believe it. He was actually pretending to get emotional about Grandpa. We loved him too, you know, he said, voice cracking with manufactured grief. It's not fair that you get everything of value. Liz nodded solemnly. You can't just keep it all to yourself, Tim. That's not what family does. I looked at each of their faces, Kevin with his crocodile tears, Liz with her sanctimonious expression, Mom looking worried, Dad just wanting peace. None of them had appreciated Grandpa when he was alive. None of them had sat with him for hours, learning the patience it took to solve a difficult puzzle, understanding the joy that came from creating something with your own hands. I stood up suddenly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. He left it to me because you all saw him as nothing but a crazy old man with a useless hobby. You laughed at him. You told him to sell his puzzles on eBay. You couldn't wait to get rid of his things after he died. Kevin started to protest, but I cut him off. I'm leaving now. Don't call me about this again. I walked out to their shouts and protests, feeling both terrible and strangely liberated. The drive home was silent. No radio, no phone calls, just me and my thoughts. When I got back to my apartment, I sat on my couch in the dark for a long time, thinking about Grandpa Joe, about the fortune he'd hidden away while living a simple life, about the decision he'd made to leave it all to me, knowing it might cause exactly this kind of family drama, and about his final message. Use this windfall wisely, Timmy. What did that mean? Was I supposed to share it with Kevin and Liz, despite their behavior? Was I supposed to keep it all and enjoy the wealth Grandpa had accumulated? Or was there some other purpose he had in mind? I sat alone in the dim light of my apartment, turning over the choices before me. I could give in to anger, use the money to get back at my siblings for years of dismissive behavior. Or I could try to find a higher purpose, something that would make Grandpa truly proud. His note still echoed in my mind. Use it wisely. What did wisdom look like in this situation? What would Grandpa Joe want me to do with his life savings? $5 million. It could change everything or destroy everything. The weight of unexpected wealth and family betrayal sat heavy on my shoulders as I contemplated what path to take next. The morning after our family showdown, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since before Grandpa Joe died. All night I'd tossed and turned, my mind wrestling with what to do about the inheritance. $5 million is the kind of money that changes not just your life, but your entire worldview. It's the kind of money that makes you question who your friends are, who you can trust, and even who you really are when the financial pressures of everyday life suddenly disappear. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at Grandpa's letter. Money is like wood. In the right hands, it can create something beautiful. The answer had been there all along. Grandpa didn't want me to just have the money. He wanted me to shape it into something meaningful, just like he shaped blocks of maple and oak into intricate puzzles. A memory surfaced, me at 12 years old, sitting in Grandpa's workshop while he sketched plans for a multi-layer puzzle box. I'd asked him what he would do if he ever won the lottery. Build a place where kids could learn to work with their hands. He'd said, without hesitation. Somewhere they could discover the joy of solving problems and making things. I called Amy and asked her to meet me for breakfast at our favorite diner. When she arrived, I could tell she was worried. Probably thought I was going to break up with her after my weird disappearing act and family drama. "Are you okay?" she asked, sliding into the booth. "You look like you haven't slept." I took a deep breath and pushed a folder across the table. Inside was a copy of Grandpa's inventory of assets. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, mouth falling open when she got to the total at the bottom. "Is this for real?" she whispered, looking around as if worried someone might be eavesdropping. I nodded. Grandpa Joe had a secret life as a genius investor. That wooden puzzle box led me to the safety deposit box at a bank in Cincinnati. Amy sat back, shaking her head in disbelief. $5 million? From your flannel-wearing, coupon-clipping grandfather? The one who used to bring his own tea bag to restaurants and ask for hot water. The very same. I told her everything. About the safety deposit box, about Kevin and Liz's demands, about my sleepless night trying to figure out what to do next. "So what are you going to do?" she asked when I'd finished. "I'm going to build Grandpa's dream," I said, surprised at the confidence in my voice. "A place where kids can learn about puzzles and problem-solving and making things with their hands. A STEM center focused on hands-on learning. The kind of place that would have made him proud." Amy's eyes filled with tears. He would have hugged you so hard for that idea. We spent the next few hours sketching plans on diner napkins, talking about locations, programs, equipment. The more we talked, the more right it felt. This wasn't just about honoring Grandpa. It was about creating something that embodied the values he'd shared with me. "We should call it Joe's Workshop," Amy suggested. I smiled, remembering all those hours in Grandpa's sawdust-filled sanctuary. Or maybe Joe's laboratory. He always said his workshop was where he experimented with ideas. Over the next few months, my life transformed completely. I quit my graphic design job and dedicated myself full-time to establishing what we eventually named the Joe Miller Laboratory for Creative Problem Solving. I allocated $1 million from inheritance as seed funding, hired an education consultant and an architect who specialized in innovative learning spaces, and started scouting locations. The timing couldn't have been better. A former community center was up for sale just outside downtown, with plenty of space and good access to public transportation. It needed work, but the bones were solid, just like Grandpa would have said. I kept the news quiet at first, not wanting to deal with Kevin and Liz until things were more settled. They continued to send passive-aggressive texts about family obligations and doing the right thing, but I ignored them. I was doing the right thing, just not the thing they wanted. Amy was by my side through all of it, balancing her nursing shifts with helping me plan and organize. She had a gift for thinking about the practical details I often overlooked in my enthusiasm. "You're building this place with the same focus Grandpa had when he built his puzzles," she told me one night as we pored over floor plans. "It's like you inherited more than just his money. You got his vision, too." 6 months after finding Grandpa's fortune, I stood in what would soon be the main workshop space of the Joe Miller Laboratory. Construction crews had been working for weeks, transforming the old community center into a bright, flexible space designed to inspire creativity and problem-solving. There would be a woodworking shop with tools sized for different age groups, an electronics lab where kids could experiment with circuits and programming, a design studio with 3D printers and laser cutters, and, of course, a puzzle room filled with mechanical challenges, brain teasers, and hands-on problems to solve. The center would offer after-school programs, weekend workshops, summer camps, all centered around Grandpa's philosophy that the best way to learn was by doing, by trying and failing, and try again until you figured it out. Standing in that dusty, half-finished space, I felt Grandpa's presence so strongly I almost expected to turn around and see him inspecting the construction, offering suggestions for better storage or more efficient layout. "What do you think, Grandpa?" I asked the empty room. "Is this what you had in mind?" The only answer was the distant sound of power tools, but somehow I knew he would have approved. My personal life was transforming alongside the building. Amy and I had been talking about moving in together for a while, But apartment living had never seemed ideal. With part of the inheritance, we bought a small house. Nothing fancy, just a cozy two-bedroom with a yard big enough for a garden and maybe a dog someday. The day we closed on the house, I took Amy to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town, the kind of place where they don't put prices on the menu, and the waiter stands alarmingly close to your table the whole time. I'd been carrying the ring in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment. As we finished dessert, some kind of deconstructed cheesecake that looked like it had been designed by an architect rather than a chef, I took her hand across the table. You know, all this money, the center, the house, none of it means anything without you, I said, probably less smoothly than I'd rehearsed. When Grandpa left me his puzzle box, he was giving me a treasure map, but you've been my treasure all along. I pulled out the ring box and set it on the table. Amy's hands flew to her mouth. Timothy Miller, are you proposing to me with dessert metaphor? She asked, her eyes shining with tears and laughter. I'm trying to, I admitted. Is it working? She nodded, too overcome to speak, and I slipped the ring onto her finger as the waiters pretended not to watch and the couple at the next table politely applauded. The engagement announcement brought a fresh wave of outrage from Kevin and Liz. Apparently, the family grapevine had been busy. They knew about the house, suspected about the center, and were absolutely certain I was spending their share of the inheritance. The angry texts escalated to angry emails, and finally to an actual certified letter from a lawyer, demanding a full accounting of assets improperly withheld from the estate. I'd been expecting something like this, and had already consulted with my own lawyer, who assured me that Grandpa's arrangements were airtight. The money was mine, legally and morally, to use as I saw fit. Still, the hostility stung. These were people I'd grown up with, people who share my blood and my history. I tried one last time to reach out, sending them both invitations to the engagement party Amy's parents were throwing for us. Kevin's RSVP came back with a single word, no. Liz didn't respond at all. Mom called me, audibly uncomfortable, caught between her children. They'll come around eventually, she said, not sounding convinced. They're just processing their greed, maybe. I replied, more bitterly than I'd intended. 3 weeks before the grand opening of the Joe Miller Laboratory, I received another letter, not from a lawyer this time, but from Liz herself, handwritten on expensive stationery. I saw the article about your STEM center in the newspaper, she wrote. Using Grandpa's money to put your name in the headlines. Clever. But remember, he was my grandfather, too. Whatever game you're playing, whatever secret you're keeping, I won't forget how you've treated your family. I set the letter aside, equal parts sad and angry. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about headlines or recognition. It was about honoring the man who had shaped my view of the world, about making sure his values and wisdom continued to touch lives even after he was gone. I wrote back a simple response. The grand opening is April 15th at 2 p.m. The door is always open if you want to see what Grandpa's legacy really looks like. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. The grand opening of the Joe Miller Laboratory for Creative Problem Solving fell on a perfect spring day, the kind Grandpa would have appreciated for its opportunity to work with the garage door up. We'd invited local schools, community leaders, neighbors, anyone who might benefit from or support the center's mission. The main workshop, now filled with gleaming tools and workbenches sized for everyone from elementary schoolers to adults, was decorated with enlarged photos of Grandpa in his workshop, showing off his puzzles or deep in concentration at his lathe. In the center of the main hall stood a display case containing the Japanese puzzle box that had started it all. Next to it, on a simple wooden pedestal Grandpa himself had made years ago, sat a bronze plaque with his favorite saying, "Patience is the key to all doors." As people began to arrive, I found myself watching the entrance, part of me still hoping Kevin or Liz might show up. They didn't, but Mom and Dad did. Dad looking uncomfortable in a tie, but genuinely impressed as I showed him around. "Your grandfather would have loved this place," Mom said, squeezing my arm. "It's exactly what he always talked about." At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Standing on a small platform in front of what felt like half the town, I found myself at a loss for words despite having rehearsed a speech for days. The index cards in my pocket suddenly seemed inadequate, so instead, I spoke from the heart. My Grandpa Joe wasn't a wealthy man, at least not in ways most people could see. I began. He wore the same flannel shirts until they fell apart. He drove a truck that was older than me. He collected rainwater to save on his water bill. But he was rich in the things that really matter. Rich in patience. Rich in creativity. Rich in the ability to see value in what others overlooked. Rich in the wisdom to know that the journey matters more than the destination. When I was a kid, I thought he was teaching me how to solve puzzles. But what he was really teaching me was how to think, how to persevere, how to find joy in the process of figuring things out for myself. This center is his dream come to life, a place where young people can discover the satisfaction of making something with their own hands, a place where mistakes are seen as part of the learning process, not as failures, a place where patience and persistence are valued as much as quick answers. So as we cut this ribbon and officially open these doors, I'd like to propose a toast to the man who made all this possible, not just financially, but spiritually, to Grandpa Joe Miller, who hid his greatest treasure not in gold or stocks, but in the values he instilled in those around him. May we all be so rich, and may we all leave such a meaningful legacy. As the crowd applauded and the oversized scissors cut through the ribbon, I caught sight of a familiar figure standing at the back, partially hidden behind a display. Kevin had come after all, trying to be inconspicuous in sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment I thought he might turn and leave. Instead, he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. After the ceremony, as guests explored the center and kids excitedly tried out the various stations we'd set up, Kevin approached me by the refreshment table. "Nice speech," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Grandpa would have liked it." "Thanks for coming," I replied, genuinely surprised and touched. "It means a lot." He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "Liz wanted me to check it out. See what you were really up to." Of course. Still suspicious. Still thinking there must be some angle I was playing. But he was here, and that was something. "Want a tour?" I offered. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess I'd like to see what you've done with whatever was in that box." As I showed Kevin around, explaining the different areas and the programs we planned to offer, I could see his skepticism gradually giving way to reluctant appreciation. By the time we reached the puzzle room, with its wall of handcrafted wooden puzzles inspired by Grandpa's designs, he was asking genuine questions about how the center would operate. "So this is really what you're doing with the money? Building this place?" I nodded. "Most of it. Some went to a house for me and Amy. The rest is invested to keep this place running for the long term. No yachts? No sports cars? No private islands?" There was a hint of his old sarcasm, but it seemed more reflexive than malicious. "Not my style," I said. "Wouldn't have been Grandpa's either." Kevin was silent for a long moment, studying one of the wooden puzzles on display. "Why did he leave it all to you?" he finally asked, his voice quiet but intense. "Why not at least split it 3 ways?" I considered my answer carefully. I think because he knew what I'd do with it, that I wouldn't just see it as money to spend, but as a responsibility, a chance to build something that mattered. Later that evening, after the last guest had left and the catering staff were packing up, Amy found me sitting alone in the puzzle room, turning one of Grandpa's original creations over my hands. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, sitting beside me. "Just thinking about Grandpa, about how he lived so frugally despite having all that money, about why he chose me to carry on his legacy." Amy leaned her head against my shoulder. "Because you understood what really mattered to him. You saw past the worn flannel shirts and the old truck to the man underneath. You appreciated his craftsmanship, his patience, his way of seeing the world. Kevin showed up today. I told her. We actually had a civil conversation. Practically a miracle. See? Your grandfather's still working his magic," she said with a smile. "Bringing people together through puzzles. They saw a wooden box. I saw a man's soul captured in craft and care. They saw an eccentric old man wasting time on toys. I saw a master teacher sharing wisdom through every puzzle he created. They saw an inheritance to be divided. I saw a legacy to be continued. In the end, Grandpa's greatest gift wasn't the money. It was the understanding that true wealth lies not in what you possess, but in what you value, not in what you accumulate, but in what you create, not in what you keep for yourself, but in what you pass on to others. The greatest inheritance isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It's measured in values passed down, in wisdom shared, in the belief of someone who loves you enough to see the best version of yourself, even when you can't see it yourself. That's the true treasure Grandpa Joe left me. And unlike money, it's a treasure that only grows richer when it's shared.